Welcome to the Victoria Reports. Today is the 6th of June 2019, Thursday. In this episode, I'm going to discuss with you the topic of enforceability. The thoughts came to my mind after watching the escalation of the US-China trade dispute fiasco. At this moment, the talks have basically collapsed. Recently, the Chinese issued a white paper putting the blame squarely on the US side, and the United States responded by making a joint announcement by the trade representative and the Department of Treasury. In this announcement, the US stated that actually both parties have agreed on all the major matters, but only at the last minute the Chinese backtracked. Apparently, the Chinese backpedaling is because of their reluctance to put into the final written document the detailed enforceable commitments. But the US argued and insisted that such practice is only commonplace. And I would say that this is common sense. Whether you have an ordinary commercial contract or an international treaty of such importance, whatever the major obligations, commitments should be written in an unambiguous way, and the potential violations should have consequences. Whoever is responsible should pay the price. That is the meaning of enforceability. But you would be surprised that more than 30 years ago, an important document of a similar nature was signed by two important countries on the future of an important city. And with hindsight, such a document is exactly a document that has serious problems in enforceability. Yes, I'm talking about the Joint Declaration by the UK and Chinese governments signed in December 1984, deciding on the handover of Hong Kong on the 1st of July 1997. In this document, the Chinese promised that they would set up a special administrative region in Hong Kong, where Hong Kong would enjoy a high degree of autonomy, would have its own legislative and executive powers, and would have an independent judiciary, including the power of final adjudication. Also, the local government would be formed, composed of local inhabitants, and the head of the government, the so-called chief executive, a successor of the colonial governors, would be selected through a local process within the territories. But if you look at the development of events in the last decade or so, you know and should accept there are legitimate and reasonable concerns about potential violations of the Joint Declaration, to such an extent that the UK government decided to dispatch members of parliament to Hong Kong to observe the actual implementation of the Joint Declaration in 2014, but they were promptly denied entry. And after that, the Chinese government continues sporadically to make noises regarding the Joint Declaration. On the eve of the 20th anniversary of the handover, on the 30th of June 1997, a spokesman of the Foreign Ministry, Mr. Luke Kang, was quoted as saying that this Joint Declaration is now only a historical document that no longer has any realistic meaning. A few days later, however, on the 8th of July 2017, his colleague, Mr. Xu Hong, Director General of the Foreign Ministry's Treaty and Law Department, tried to clarify the Chinese position, but only made matters worse. Xu Hong was quoted as saying that the Joint Declaration is still legally binding. However, the British have no right to interfere. Bear in mind, the British has had unchallenged and actual power of administration and sovereignty of the colony of Hong Kong from 1841 to the moment they signed the Joint Declaration in 1984. They have given up all that for the period after 1997 in return for such a document that both parties, the UK and the Chinese government, signed on it and registered with United Nations, but eventually totally impossible to enforce. We cannot explain for why this happened more than 30 years ago. But eventually, we come to the understanding that it's not an easy matter to deal with China on contracts, and the enforceability is of utmost importance. I believe we just learned it the hard way. Thank you.